place to start is to ask you first to briefly describe what the Sedona Method is. Bob?
Well, the Sedona Method is something that's simple. I think that's the first thing that I'd like people to know. And it's something that's natural and something that's spontaneous. If you watch little kids play, you'll see them switch from one emotion, perhaps anger, sadness, or fear, to another one instantaneously almost. They'll go from one feeling to another and then back again. They're playing with someone they were mad at. The method is a way that we re-experience that way we dealt with it in childhood. We identify the feeling, and then we release it so that when we check back inside, it's gone. And that's the beautiful part of it. It's something all of us have done. It's something that people find it easy to learn on course. And the thing some people would like to know is, well, what does it feel like? And I often ask people to remember a time that they've been, for example, in a big parking lot in a city, maybe one with several levels. They've lost their car. Can't remember whether it was in the H's or the I's. They look around, they get more and more upset, frustrated, and finally, after 5 minutes of getting more and more tense or worried about it, another car pulls out. They see their car. That feeling of release, of relief, is what the method teaches us to do.
You know, both of you, Bob, yourself, practiced medicine for 20 years before becoming involved, I think full-time with the Sedona Method as a teacher. And you, David, you were located in at the pinnacle of the medical profession, being known as the father of orthomolecular psychiatry and co-authoring the classic text with Linus Pauling. How is it that you became involved with this method and now find yourself living in Sedona, Arizona, far away from the pinnacles of fame that you once knew?
Well, I found a method that was more effective than psychoanalysis, which I'd also done for some years, more effective than any form of therapy. The releasing method, for instance, allows you to come out of a feeling that may have plagued you for 20 years in an instant. You can accomplish things in moments that would take months or years in therapy. And I've always searched for something to relieve human suffering. That's how I got into orthomolecular psychiatry. Everything I've ever done has been sort of geared in that direction. I never saw a more effective method than this in relieving human suffering instantly. And I've done most of the consciousness programs around. This I found to be the purest. In other words, it's a very simple technique. And what Lester discovered that was amazing was...
You're referring to the founder, the creator.
The founder, yeah. And that there's another method that psychiatry had not found of handling feelings, and that is releasing them. See, Anna Freud, in her book on the ego and the methods of defense, we all know that repression and suppression and displacement, all these common ways of handling feelings. But what Lester came upon was that these feelings can be released. In other words, as the energy, the suppressed energy comes up, the feeling is released instantly, as fast as that. So that you can be angry at somebody for 20 years and mulling it around with guilt and trying to forgive and going through all your mental processes. And the instant you release it, it's gone. And it works just marvelously. The amount of fear, for instance, that it releases, fear being like Jampolsky in Course in Miracles says there's only two emotions, love and fear. Anyway, just as I noticed walking up to the Grand Canyon, at one time I had such a fear of heights I wouldn't get within a block of the Grand Canyon. And now I can sit on the edge and look over. I mean, that was a lifetime fear. I mean, it was more than a fear, it was a terror. And I can sit on the edge of the Grand Canyon, look down happily, swinging my feet. So anything that can release that intense fear of that many years' duration in a few instants. Must be a powerful technique.
Do you recall when you first came in touch with the method?
I think it was 76 or 77. I'd already done EST and a number of other things. And somebody told me that this was far and beyond anything that they had seen or tried. Well, I've been a student of Zen for many years, and Buddhism in general. So when I heard it was a method that releases you from your attachments, well, that's all you need, of course, to go the whole route. You can release yourself from your attachments, then the end is certain. So as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, fantastic. You know, the Buddha said the cause of all suffering is attachments. So if there was a method that instantaneously releases you, that's just what I wanted. So I went right for it. And I found it worked instantly. The very first day they teach you the method, so I naturally experimented with it. I remember at the time I went to learn the course, I had a surgical condition for which I was scheduled for surgery on a Friday. A structural change of the body that requires nothing but surgery. No medical thing could have helped it. And by the time I finished the weekend, it was gone. Canceled the surgery, never had it back. I said, wow, this is something.
It's quite a testimonial.
Yes.
Really.
That was my first experience. And of course, at that time, I had many stress-related illnesses. I had duodenal ulcer and diverticulitis and migraine headaches and many allergies. And they were all cured instantly. Diverticulitis is gone, ulcer's gone, all the allergies gone, fear of heights is gone. I found I could cure anything in the body. I remember a year ago I broke my foot in November, and by Christmas I was dancing in the disco. And I really demonstrated that the body does what the mind believes. So, for instance, I can stop bleeding in an instant. If I cut myself, it instantly stops bleeding. I walk through poison ivy. So just releasing on these programs that we have is what frees us.
Bob, do you recall your first contact with the method?
The first contact I had was about 2 years ago. And at that time, I'd been in private practice. I'd taught neurology for about 7 or 8 years before that. I'd been in private practice for about 2 years. For about 6 months, and two close friends of mine became quite ill. I had thought I was pretty much in control of things, but the impact of illness and those close to me whom I was taking care of made me realize that there was something missing. And a friend of mine told me about the method. I took it, and I found that I was able to take my insecurities, my feeling uncomfortable in these two difficult situations, and release them so I could be much more of service to those people. I could feel better. I could maintain an objective, still care for them, but maintain a more detached attitude. And as I did it more and more, I felt better than I'd ever been able to feel before. I realized as I compared using the method with what I was able to do in my practice that using the method to give to people, I was able to give them something that they could use for themselves. In my practice, I'd tried to do that. I would ask people, and I'd started early when I was in medicine. I realized that what I'd been taught in medical school was only the smallest part of the tip of the iceberg. I had been taught, as a matter of fact, I realized and I knew at the time, I was being taught lots and lots about the most esoteric, arcane, special illnesses. So I was an expert on those things. But as I got into seeing what was really the problem with people, I saw that those illnesses were extremely rare and that the common things I really had never been taught anything about. Back pain, headaches, muscle tightness, various things that all of us go through, but in medical school there's very little taught. And most doctors, I think, are at a loss to deal with these problems. They can see there's some emotional component, but just how to deal with it is left up to, physical therapists, perhaps use of massage, Valium, drugs like that. Well, I could see that those things were very important because most of the patients I saw either had them or in response to a serious illness, their emotional or in response to a serious illness, their emotional reaction was so crippling that it made their ability to deal with the illness very much impaired. And I saw that as they were able, when I saw patients who were able to deal more easily with this, when they could become calmer, things worked out better. So I saw that what I needed to do was to find a way that I could give to people that they could use for themselves, that they didn't need to come back to me. They could be their own doctor and their own patient. And I started teaching the method about 6 months after I took it. I saw it was so powerful. And I continued to practice for about a year. And about a year ago, I stopped because I saw that what I could do with this method was so much more effective. I just had someone, as a neurologist, one of the problems I used to see commonly was headache, neck pain, and so forth, and whiplash injuries were particularly troublesome. And there was a person on course 2 weeks ago who had fallen off his bicycle about a year ago, had had constant pain in his neck and upper chest since that time, had gone through all sorts of treatment but hadn't really gotten better. And by using the method for only 5 days, he came into class the second weekend and said, I feel a little incredulous and I feel a little uncomfortable about telling you this, but I used the method, I released, and the pain at first would get less, and as soon as I'd release the pain, I'd start to feel afraid. Then I'd release the fear feeling, pain would come back a little bit, I'd release that, more fear would come, I'd release the fear, and gradually both the pain and the fear went away. And now I don't have any pain. I feel normal again. That kind of experience I have seen over and over and over again. I never saw it in medicine. I know that giving people drugs that depress them simply helps them to suppress those feelings. And a whiplash is a good example. I'd seen lots and lots of people with it and was amazed that they couldn't get better. But then I began to see what the problem was. When we have a shock to the body, our muscles tighten up to protect us. We think that we need to have the tightness, which produces pain, in order to continue to be protected. So as soon as the tightness goes away, the fear comes up, and that will keep us unable to let go of the tightness. So by working on both at once, this person was able, as a lot of other people have with similar things, to let go of the whole thing and feel well. So it's been something.
I'm speaking with Robert Scott and David Hawkins. We're exploring the Sedona Method. We'll be right back. been talking about the simplicity of the technique, of the method itself, and I'm wondering how you would compare the technique or the method with other approaches to changing one's consciousness or raising one's consciousness. I think of things like the S training, actualizations, LifeSpring, and such programs as that. How would you compare the Sedona Method with those programs?
Well, those programs, first of all, you need a method to release the old programs. And any of the consciousness programs that put in new programs are weakened by the fact that they're canceled out by thousands of old programs that negate it. And these programs are subsumed under a feeling. In other words, the simplicity of this method and the reason for its rapidity of effect is that it's dealing with repressed feelings, suppressed feelings, and the energies are released as they come up. Now, one feeling may be associated with millions of thoughts, so that programs, consciousness programs dealing with thought, are very weak and slow by comparison. In other words, one feeling represents the cumulative effect of millions of thoughts, and as you release that one feeling, you literally wipe out the millions of thoughts associated with that one feeling.
But in something like, David, in something like EST, or particularly EST, I think of, frequently people will come up with suppressed feelings.
They do, yes, but not in a predictable way and not continuous. See, the method works continuously, so that if something should happen in the studio, let's say, and fear would arise, as the fear came up, it's instantly released. So you're not accumulating any more programs. You're constantly releasing what you've suppressed, not only this lifetime, but whatever you came into this life with. So many of the programs that you're releasing, of course, they're millions of years old, really, many, many lifetimes. And all these feelings have to do with survival, really. The lower self, the ego, all is subsumed under that term, are really all the programs we've accumulated to ensure our survival, to keep us separate, to keep us thinking that we're bodies. And as these programs are released, who you really are becomes increasingly apparent, until you really experience just your own beingness. And in your own beingness, you see your own perfection and that of others.
One might interpret what you just said as kind of releasing the mind or getting rid of thoughts, and the lurking danger of brainwashing comes up. How would you respond to that question?
It unbrainwashes, it unprograms. In other words, this method has no new programs. There's no metaphysical teachings. There's no new programs at all. It's an unprogramming technique. And what happens is the mind becomes quieter and quieter. See, because thoughts are created by a suppressed feeling. And the way to wipe out thoughts is you watch a train of thoughts and you look for the feeling that's triggering this train of thoughts. And as you release the feeling, that train of thoughts disappears, so that eventually the mind becomes silent. And in this silent beingness state, one just knows. And thoughts are not necessary. The man is so used to thoughts and feelings, he thinks that's normal. In fact, thoughts disappear, and as emotions are constantly released, they begin to disappear as well. Necessary. The man is so used to thoughts and feelings, he thinks that's normal. In fact, thoughts disappear, and as emotions are constantly released, they begin to disappear as well. And then you're in a state of peace and imperturbable calm at all times, in which everything is just known.
When one experiences this and then one moves back into one's everyday life, how does one integrate this non-thinking beingness with the practical problems one comes in touch with in one's job or family life?
It continues as you walk about in the world. The beauty of the method is that it's working all the time as you go about in the world. In fact, it's recommended that you stay in the world, because in the world is what's bringing up your programs. And to isolate yourself on a mountaintop, you can get above your garbage, and of course you're feeling great and you think you're in a fantastic space until you go back into the world and all the garbage comes up again. So it's recommended with those who've learned the method to stay in the world, because the world is bringing up your garbage for you to release.
I think in line with the question that you asked about other methods of doing things, that this is, everyone has had different kinds of experiences, perhaps starting with a beautiful experience of nature when we were little, or listening to music or something like that. And the question that goes for practically every kind of discipline or path that we follow, and we spend a lot of time trying to recapture that moment, to recapture the feeling. And we're dealing with something that happens in an isolated moment in time. What we're really concerned about with our life is every day, every moment of every day. And if you try and spend that moment remembering what it felt like when you heard a Haydn Mass or played music with someone else and enjoyed it, it's frustrating because it happened in the past. What the method allows people to do, and I think that that's why it's different from everything else, is to take the feeling that you have at the moment, to release that feeling or feelings until you get to a point of feeling comfortable, calm, and peaceful, so that whatever is happening in the world, you inside are in that imperturbable state. You can, as David says, you can get away from things. If you look at the problems of the world and the way we attempt to deal with them, you can see that a situation, for example, like a job or a relationship, might be the source of stress, might appear to be, or discomfort. And yet when you look at it a little harder in perspective, you see that at times it's quite pleasant. At other times it's stressful, so it's not in the situation itself. It's clear it's our response to it. Now, our response is going on 24 hours a day. And in order to be effective, any method, it seems to me, needs to be able to be available and work at any moment of the day. So if you look at how do we deal with these problem situations, well, we may try and get away from them. That's the most common way of handling a feeling. Something awkward comes up, we want to move away. We leave the room, or we leave the job, or we leave the person. But frequently, as often as not, the same problem comes up with the next job, or the next person, or the next situation. Another, and perhaps actually more frequent, really, way to deal with a feeling is to suppress it. We'll become aware of a feeling of dislike for someone that we have to spend time with, and we'll push the feeling out of the way, because in order to work smoothly with another person, we can't have that feeling of irritation or anger or annoyance. The difficulty is that the feeling is still there, and the harder we push down, the tighter and more compressed the feeling is, the more it wants to get back up. So the upshot of it is that as people get older and accumulate more and more feelings, they feel tired, more tired, have less energy, feel more tense, feel more under the gun, feel they have to move faster, and become more rushed. And the end result is that those suppressed feelings, which have accumulated, run us instead of our being able to be in control of them. So we say that the simplest way to deal with it, every moment of every day, is to take the feeling. What is the feeling? Is it a feeling I could release? Do I need it now? Or would it be more constructive in this situation to have another feeling? So it gives the person control at each moment. And I think that's one of the major differences between this and practically anything else. You don't have to go away to do it. It isn't something you have to come back to a person who can help you with it. Once you learn it in the course, it's yours. And we encourage people as we teach it to learn it their own way, see the ways they can integrate it into their life. And that, of course, depends on what they do.
Though there's no philosophy as such associated with the method, what happens to people? I mean, I'm sure that the kind of experience you're describing obviously changes people's perception of the world around them, and that has to involve their approach to dealing with the world. So what about that? What happens to those people who experience the method from the standpoint of their own personal philosophy?
Well, the method is experiential. It's not intellectual. And what it gets rid of is anger, grief, fear, lust, anger, pride. Takes you up to courage, then to
We're talking about the
acceptance.
deadly sins.
Takes you up to love, and finally to peace.
I see.
And
So Christ was teaching the Sedona Method.
he didn't tell you the
2,000 years ago.
technique. He told you to forgive your brother, but he didn't tell you exactly how to do that, how to let it go.
And that's the key, isn't it?
You see, what all the methods are not telling you is how to let it go. And what he says is so, but he doesn't tell you how to do it. So you can struggle a lifetime, let's say, to achieve one forgiveness, which, when you know an effective method, can be released in a matter of seconds or minutes. And so we feel that, or I've observed, that the method allows anybody to achieve whatever their spiritual goals may be. If you're a Mormon, you're going to become a better Mormon. If you're a Catholic, you're going to be a better Catholic. Whatever religious or spiritual or consciousness goal you have, you see, if we could be at the end instantly if it weren't for the attachments and the programs that are standing in the way. So if we knew a method to release them, we would, achieve our goal instantly. So the beauty of the method is it allows you to get wherever you want to go. It removes all the barriers.
Is the answer in the method, or is the answer in the person experiencing it?
You have to first want to let go of all your garbage. Otherwise the method wouldn't appeal to you. I mean, if you're still enjoying, anger, fear, grief, and all those things, then it wouldn't appeal to you. But if you've reached that point in life when you want life to become better, this is a technique that will take you out of all that misery, and it does it rapidly. And you don't have to read anything about metaphysics or any such things. The truth of all the world's teachings become your own experience. And in fact, it's advised not to read. I haven't read anything in a long time now. In other words, there's no point in contaminating yourself with further programs. Every spiritual book you read has to be released later. Every sentence that you've studied, memorized, and has to be let go of. Every single thing spoken in words is a program.
How do you
Everyone
avoid?
is a limitation.
How do you avoid that becoming a program?
The technique itself?
How do you avoid what you're just saying from becoming a program? That I've got to release all these things.
Experientially, you find it so. Experientially, you find that every teaching is a limitation. It has to be, because what speaks words but one's ego? Consequently, they're all programs. However, there's good programs and bad programs, you might say. And as you get higher and higher within the illusion, finally you start it's like you get up the ladder, then you pull the ladder up after you. So right now I'm in the process of pulling the ladder up after me, letting go all the stuff that I learned over the years.
You asked the question of
finding it.
what people do with it, and obviously people do with it what they want to. That's the purpose of this course. We say for you to take the method and use it for what you want. We don't have any direction for people to go in. As David mentioned, we see that most of our feelings can be put into the category, starting with the lowest one in terms of energy level, of apathy. And that's the feeling we don't feel we can do anything. Why bother anyway? Can't fight City Hall. Next up the line is a feeling of grief, of sadness, of disappointment. And there's a little more energy in that. When we come to fear,